let's watch this video. Make sure you like, share and comment. After watching it, please come back, let's discuss about it in the comment section. Thank you.
We don't have any of our own. Some, I don't know, Chinese, Vietnamese, not even I know who it is.
Vladimir Putin's Ukrainian adventure has dragged Russia not only into military losses, but also into a demographic disaster. Russia is experiencing a process of invasion, stretching from the Ural Mountains to Siberia, from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Now Moscow's famous Red Square has turned into a dance floor for Indian workers. Once Russian marches played under Lenin's statue, now Bollywood tunes can be heard. Russian streets are being taken over by Indians walking around with loudspeakers, shouting and calling out. It all started with the Kremlin's fast curry policy, setting a quota of 72,000 workers from India for 2025. While Russian men were losing their lives on the front lines, a massive air bridge was established between New Delhi and Moscow to fill the vacancies they left behind at workbenches, steering wheels, and construction sites. The images on the ground bring this air bridge to life. The queues forming in front of the migrant offices and employment centers in Moscow are reminiscent of the bread lines during the Soviet era. But this time, it is not Russians waiting in line, but tens of thousands of Indians. This influx of Indians has already been accommodated in hostels. The dill that is the signature of Russian cuisine has given way to garam masala and curry rising from the hostels. The most striking aspect of this human traffic is its institutional architecture. Following Putin's visit to India, Russia's largest financial institution, Sberbank, went beyond its banking activities and essentially transformed into a state-backed human resources agency. The bank's priority is no longer ruble transfers, but financing and organizing a regular flow of labor from India to Moscow. Future projections take the situation from a crisis to an existential catastrophe. Russian First Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov said that, "We are ready to accept an unlimited number of workers. The planned addition of 40,000 Indian workers by 2026 and the Ural Chamber of Commerce's alarming prediction that we need 1 million Indian workers show that Russia is opening its doors wide." The gloomy atmosphere in St. Petersburg, the subject of Dostoevsky's novels, is now taking on a completely different cultural texture. Indian workers here are offered a salary of approximately 100,000 rubles, which is considered high by Russian standards. This income corresponds to earnings of over $1,200. An average Russian worker earns a maximum of 60,000 rubles per month. To see how this income gap affects Russian workers, just watch this video.
Got the special operation to earn. Well, many did just that, by the way, and now I see the Indians are working a full week. I realize they are paid peanuts, and we're just being pushed out to save money.
Everywhere from the industrial cities of the Ural region to the suburbs of Moscow is under the influence of this new demographic wave. When you ride the Moscow metro, you see South Asians more than Slavic faces. However, this transformation is not limited to silent acceptance. It is creating a terrible wave of friction and violence at the grassroots level of society. Those famous Z-patriotic Russians at their keyboards have been raving about India and Modi on Telegram channels and Twitter for months. They chanted slogans like "BRICS Brotherhood" and "Shoulder to shoulder against Western imperialism," sanctifying the alliance forged with Asia.
Moreover, when it touches directly upon our ties, and the thing is the stability in certain spheres of cooperation.
However, when those virtual brothers descended onto the streets of Moscow and began filling Russian jobs and neighborhoods, that digital love ended abruptly, giving way to street fights. If the wave of labor coming from India is a demographic leak, relations with China are the complete collapse of the dam. Putin handed over Russia's keys to Beijing under the guise of unlimited friendship in order to survive Western sanctions. Russia's visa-free entry for Chinese citizens effectively eliminated border controls. This move was a result of the Kremlin's economic desperation. Needing Chinese tourists for foreign currency inflows, Russia has turned St. Petersburg's famous Nevsky Prospect into a veritable Chinese market. Now, instead of Russian whispers in front of the Winter Palace or in the corridors of the Hermitage Museum, the echoes of Chinese tour guides' megaphones can be heard. Images from the field show just how devastating this transformation has been. The huge Chinese groups walking the streets of St. Petersburg resemble property owners who have come to inspect the city rather than tourists who have come to visit. These crowds are encroaching on the daily living space of Russian shopkeepers and the general public. Places once frequented by the Russian aristocracy and intelligentsia are now under the control of masses driven by the power of the yuan. Putin has fallen into the position of a merchant selling Russia's cultural heritage for cash. Alongside Chinese tourists, seeing large numbers of Chinese workers in Russia is now the new normal. The visibility and concentration of Chinese people has increased dramatically in many large cities, such as Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, and Blagoveshchensk. However, the darkest side of this relationship is emerging in the Far East, in Vladivostok. In this city, once known as the ruler of the East, Russian citizens are now treated as second-class citizens in their own land. A video leaked on social media, causing an uproar, shows Chinese students beating a Russian cleaner. But the chaos doesn't stop there. Social media posts by local Russian citizens summed up the horror of this devastating decision in one ominous sentence. Putin signed a decree granting Chinese citizens visa-free entry to Russia. But technically, the border still exists. Will they control their future assets in Siberia? This anxiety was not unfounded. We had witnessed images of how Russia's natural resources were being consumed and heard a citizen's cry of despair. The resource monster China, led by the Communist Party, is consuming Siberia. They are cutting down these birch trees, taking the red forest, the centuries-old pines. According to reports from Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service, in order to finance its war machine in Ukraine, the Putin regime is effectively handing over control of the country's richest lands. That vast geography comprising approximately 40% of Russia's total area, to Beijing. But there is an even more dystopian layer to the story: North Korea. Putin has become dependent not only on China's economic power, but also on the slave labor of the world's most isolated regime. The bringing of 50,000 North Korean workers to Russia is one of the largest state-sponsored human trafficking operations in modern history. These people are not working as laborers on Russian construction sites, but as biological robots hired by the regime. 18-hour workdays, only 2 days off per month, and near zero job security. While Putin declares war on Western values, he has transformed his own country into a modern version of Stalinist labor camps. Luxury housing projects in St. Petersburg and Moscow are now being built not by Russian engineers, but by this shadow army. The existence of a 5,000-strong construction army unit is proof that Russia's technical capacity has collapsed. Even more alarming, according to Ukrainian intelligence reports, North Korean workers are being assigned to factories in Russia for drone production. The Russian defense industry, that vaunted invincible complex, is now entrusted to Kim Jong-un's workers. This is tearing apart the fabric of Russian society. On one side are the Chinese, who have money and are buying up the city. On the other are the North Koreans, working in misery and sometimes rebelling. Ukrainian official Anton Gerashenko asks the obvious question at this point. How many of them will actually stay on the construction sites, and how many will be used on the front lines? The answer is not hidden in the dark corridors of the Kremlin. It is clearly evident in Russia's past practices. First, they brought in Central Asians, then Cubans, then Nepalese. The promise was always the same: high-paying construction work. The scenario plays out as predictably as a horror movie. The workers arrive in Moscow, their passports are confiscated, and they are presented with papers written in Cyrillic, of which they understand not a single word. Those papers, which they are made to sign under the pretext of just a procedure, construction insurance, are actually their death warrants. The moment they sign, their status changes from worker to contract soldier, and they find themselves in the killing fields of Ukraine with Kalashnikovs in their hands. And the evidence coming from the field hits us in the face with this horrific reality. Look at the helplessness of this Indian man on the screen as he describes the horror he experienced. I worked for 2 days, and on the third day they gave me the coordinates. I saw Ukrainian soldiers. I'm not Russian. I'm not Russian. I just want to go home and forget about these things.
It's like normal delivery. 2 days I work it, and third day they give me the coordinates. And I see Ukrainian blinders. No, I think if I surrender, so Ukrainian soldier also help me for. I just want to go back in India. I'm not a Russian. I'm not a Russian. I just want to go back my home. I just want to forget about these things.
These words belong not to a volunteer fighting for the Russian world, but to a civilian who came hoping to earn a few $100s and became a victim of a war crime. And this model is not limited to uneducated workers. The system is so greedy that it swallows up anyone it catches. The story of Iranian Arash Darbandi proves how the legal system in Russia has turned into a human hunt. Darbandi, a petroleum engineer and photographer, was detained during a routine police check in St. Petersburg, where he had arrived on a tourist visa. And he was presented with that terrible dilemma, either prison or the front line. Darbandi's testimony also exposes the racist caste system within the Russian army. In training camps, Russian soldiers and foreigners are strictly separated. Africans, Middle Easterners, Iranians, Latin Americans, they are kept in separate barracks, not properly trained, and sent to the front without even learning how to use weapons. Because in the eyes of Russian commanders, they are not soldiers, they are expendables. The most painful and humiliating part for the Russian people is the financial aspect. Putin is spending his own people's livelihood on this imported army. Russia pays North Korean soldiers approximately $2,000 per person per month. This money is a lifeline of $500 million a year for the North Korean regime.